Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
There we go. Now we have audio. Have to remember on this old clunker computer to reset the audio every time. Okay, so now after misfire number 2 tonight, I apologize for our late start, but we are here. We are live, and I think we're firing on all cylinders. We're just going to do it. Even if we don't have any audio or video, I'm just going to sit here and talk. Just going to sit here and talk. I think we've got it now, though. I'll check it. Yeah, now we're good. Okay. Take 3. Donald Trump. Of course, Donald Trump leading the news today, dominating the headlines, dominating at Davos at the World Economic Forum. Yesterday was Mark Carney that received, some are saying a standing ovation. I don't know if it was that. If it was exactly that. It was, he did get a lot of applause, and his speech, I think, did get a lot of traction worldwide as he kind of dug in his heels and took a stand against Donald Trump. Maybe for the good, maybe for the worse here in Canada. I can tell you that tonight, Donald Trump is saying that he has the framework for a deal now to get his hands on Greenland after meeting with the head of NATO at the World Economic Forum. And we have a lot of reaction, a lot of fallout following Trump's speech in Davos, a speech that still went off at the scheduled time, even though he was 2 hours late because of that electrical problem with Air Force One. We'll dig into all of it when we come back on the other side of this.
Maverick News isn't just a news outlet, it's a community of truth seekers. Your donation at freedomreporters.com fuels our mission to report the stories that mainstream media won't touch. Thank you, Maverick family.
Okay, we're back. So I guess what we should, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to, we can't get away from Donald Trump. He's in every news story every day, it seems, in one way or another. Let's go to the Truth Social scroll, which has become a regular feature here on Maverick News. Here's what Trump is posting following his appearance in Davos. There it is. Do you see that? Can you see it? Yes, you can. He says, based on a very productive meeting that I have had with the Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, we have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. This solution, if consummated, will be a great one for the United States of America and all NATO nations. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1st. Additional discussions are being held concerning the Golden Dome as it pertains to Greenland. Further information will be made available as discussions progress. Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and various others, as needed, will be responsible for the negotiations. They will report directly to me, to him, not to me. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Every time he was, thank you for your attention to this matter. It seems, I don't know, it just seems too formal. And yet it seems stilted when he says that. It just bugs me. Does it bug anybody else? So what we're going to do now is, because I got up early this morning, got everything set up, and we live streamed Trump's entire speech from Davos. I provided some analysis afterward, commentary during. So how long did that go on? I think we were on this morning for about 2.5 hours. Oh, by the way, record number of viewers over on Twitch as a result of that. So we did pretty good over there building the channel. Isn't that something? So yeah, we live streamed that. A lot of viewers on YouTube as well today. Lots of viewers. So lots of interest in this. And as a result, we've got a lot of fallout, a lot of backlash, a lot of applauding, depending on which side of the political aisle you are on. Anyway, you slice it. What Trump is doing is very disruptive. In addition to posting that on Truth Social, Trump also answered questions from some members of the media regarding this apparent framework for a deal. Let's go to him right now in this clip, and you'll see what I mean.
Does it still include you? Does it still include the United States having ownership of Greenland like you've said you wanted?
It's a long-term deal. It's the ultimate long-term deal. And I think it puts everybody in a really good position, especially as it pertains to security and minerals and everything else.
Have you how long is it, Mr. President?
Low audio.
Have you really spoken to other European leaders?
Yes, I have.
How long would the deal be, Mr. President?
Infinite.
Will there speak to Denmark?
There is no time limit. It's forever.
And how would you ratify the deal?
Money involved.
It's signed forever.
But you haven't signed anything yet, right?
It's a deal that's forever.
Will there be an effect anyway, Mr. President? Will there be an
No
effect?
money. People, what happens is people are out there and they're working it right now. They're working the details of the deal, but it's what's called an infinite deal. It's forever.
You talked about...
So it's an infinite deal forever. The ultimate long-term deal. It doesn't get much longer than that. Infinite. Infinity. Infinity. Even after the earth ceases to exist, this deal will persist. But we really don't have many, if any, details coming out of this thing. As a result, some people's brains and heads are blowing up. Let me see here. Where did my clip go? Right here. Okay. So let's go over here to the Midas Touch. Because they're tonight, of course, taking this. Well, they're looking at it this way. It's pretty wide range of opinions and analysis on this. That's what I've found about everything that's gone on in the last 48 hours is, and even before, all this Greenland stuff is pushing people into strange positions politically, where it almost seems like, strangely, they're switching sides. Like Doug Ford, Mark Carney splitting on tariffs and the approach to Trump, but it's now flipped-flopped because now it's Carney that's upsetting Trump, and Doug Ford is like, he's in favor of tariffs now, even though he was against tariffs before because he wants the tariffs to remain in place on China. So it's this politics makes strange bedfellows. Here's here's this take on it. Okay. Where'd my clip go? There it is. Listen to this.
Donald Trump has apparently caved in his threats to invade Greenland or take it over by force or acquire it. His threats against Greenland and Denmark rightfully sparked international outrage and solidarity against Donald Trump's regime. And while in Davos, Donald Trump just posted the following moments ago, where he announced a fake deal with Greenland and Denmark and NATO, with no terms, with no specifics, just one of Donald Trump's fake deals as he caves in order to try to save face. Let me read it for you, and then I'll also show you that Donald Trump moments ago spoke with the press, where he talked about this fake deal now that he says he's entered into with Greenland and Denmark that's indefinite, and he got what he wanted the whole time. It's just so utterly pathetic and weak that he does this over and over again. And let's be clear, I'm glad that he's not going to invade Greenland, or at least he says that, but his words are meaningless. Who the hell knows what he even means at this point? It's pathetic. It's loser behavior, and the world just needs to stand up to it, and people need to stand up against this utter insanity. Here's what.
Yeah, he doesn't need to read it again. We just read it, and we've just listened to the clip. So, yeah, is it a fake deal? Is it a deal at all? Yeah, he has a valid point, because Trump always uses this language like a framework for a deal. That's not really a deal. And this is a deal for infinity. Have you ever heard of such a thing before? Well, he's definitely one of a kind, Mr. Trump. So I don't know what the hell that is. I guess we won't find out until we get some details. If we get details, I can just say this. At least he said today that he's not going to use military force to get the things that he wants. But during the speech, he also said that, if Greenland would agree, if the people of Greenland would agree to have Greenland purchased, the United States would be very appreciative. But if they don't, the United States will remember. I don't know what that means either. It's all this weird, shadowy, cloak and dagger, half-baked message stuff that just leaves you scratching your head and wondering. And I will say this, I think it's bloody dangerous. Bloody dangerous, because you have the leader of what was supposed to be the free world and a guy with a nuclear arsenal at his fingertips, what is really the most technologically advanced, sophisticated, largest, most lethal military force in the world in history. And he speaks in this language where it leaves people guessing, and he's clearly leveling threats at allied nations, NATO partners, and he's left people in such a place of instability, other countries in such a place of instability. They're literally sending troops to Greenland right now. There are NATO troops on the ground there, positioned for what, drills? No, they're there because of the possibility that the United States might actually invade. But then today he says, oh no, I would never do that. That's how far he's willing to take these negotiations to get the things that he wants. It's crazy. And it's dangerous, because things can easily get out of hand when things get that close to the edge. It's irresponsible. And NATO is on the verge of flying apart, disintegrating, which some people will applaud. I'm sure that Vladimir Putin is just pleased as punch to see all of this happening. Yeah. If you want to watch the whole thing, you can find the full speech archived, still up, and it will remain there, as do our other videos on the Maverick News channel over on Rumble or YouTube or one of the other platforms. It should be up on Twitter, X as well. Now, here's Ann Applebaum from The Atlantic. She says all this stuff with Greenland really for people should be the last straw. And I kind of, I can't believe that it has gone this far where the president of the United States is like literally threatening and has threatened a NATO ally. And somehow his behavior has become so normalized that people think that that this is like, they're concerned about it, but even now they're still like tolerant of it. There should be like zero tolerance for this, but I would think people are afraid.
Invade Greenland because he didn't get the Nobel. Donald Trump cannot invade Greenland because he didn't get the Nobel Prize. Let's think this out. What would an American occupation of Greenland look like? The Marines would arrive in Nuuk, in the capital city. There would be a skirmish because the Danes will defend it. Some Americans will die for this project. Maybe some Danes will die. Maybe some Greenlandic citizens will die. And then what happens after that? The Danes will simply concede, or will they continue to fight? Will there be continued pushback? And what will the Americans do? Russians in that situation, we know what they would do. They would arrest all the politicians. They would shoot people for speaking Danish in the street. They would take over schools and change the curricula. And they would, of course, hold a fake referendum in order to rubber stamp their occupation. What's the U.S. plan to make people who don't want to be Americans, to make them Americans? Are we going to forcibly make them accept Social Security numbers? Will we kill people who don't speak English? I don't think there's been any thought put into this or any planning. And the more you think it through, the crazier it gets. This, I think, should be the final straw. This is the moment when Republicans in Congress, who have the power to stop Donald Trump, and perhaps people around him, although I don't have much faith in it, should say, no, this has gone too far. This is too crazy. The costs are too high. Trade war, the economic disruption, the chaos, and the violence that could follow this madness needs to be put into an end.
I think she's wrong about something, but one thing at least. There has been planning that has gone into this. There has been a lot of planning that has gone into this. Many, many years of planning. Oh, we've talked about it here. Acquiring Greenland. Oh, it's so much planning that he was talking about this during Trump 1.0. It goes back that far, at least for him, and I think well before that. So no, this was planned. And that's why it's going down the way it's going, I think, because I don't think he's alone. Clearly he's not. He has a whole team behind him, obviously, but I think it goes beyond that too. This is part of a grand plan. This is no accident. I kind of wonder even sometimes if the people who appear to be opposed to what he's doing, some of them, are actually on side with him. What do they call that? Oh, controlled opposition. It wouldn't surprise me a bit. I even wonder about Mark Carney and his speech yesterday, because when you look at the content of it, you know, I think it was a great speech, and I think that it called out some of the truths, unspoken truths of the old rules-based international order, where, you know, he's really acknowledging in that speech that through all of the years where we've had since post-World War II, a lot of Western nations have been beneficiaries of abuses, essentially, of smaller countries, weaker countries, where they present themselves, including Canada, I think, in many respects. We present ourselves, or at least our leaders do, as defenders of freedom and democracy and fairness and virtue, when in reality, we are oppressing people in smaller, weaker countries, third world countries, where you have a lot of even human rights violations. I think there was an element of that in Carney's speech yesterday. So he exposed the underbelly of the first world. And I think that people in the global south will applaud that. I think they are applauding what Carney did yesterday. I was like, yeah, say it out loud, man. Because what we're getting right now, though, is also from Trump an honest, raw truth, right? At least in Trump world, which is that might makes right. And if you have all the guns and or most of the guns or the bigger guns or the bigger bombs, if you have the bomb, you get a place at the table. And if you have the most bombs backed up with a bunch of conventional weapons, then you get to make the rules. You hold all the cards. And if you don't give a damn, you get to just pretty much impose whatever you want. And the only thing that can stop you, as he said, is his own mind and his own morality. Whatever that is, which means nothing. Only he can stop himself, and he's not going to stop. Or isn't he? Maybe he just did. Because maybe it's the people who can stop him, because at the end of the day, he's only the president because the people support him. Oh, except he's the acting president of Venezuela. Not elected, just self-appointed. He wasn't even selected. Well, he selected himself, at least in his own mind. By the way, just for clarification, it's the Gulf of Mexico. That's right. That's something else Carney was calling for yesterday, was reality. It was a reality check in a lot of ways, talking about old Soviet-style propaganda and information, social media, and I would say it's social media control, old school style, where they make you think certain things and you have to set a signal your compliance with the old Soviet era lies. You have to buy into it. And he would say that that's putting a sign out in the front window of your shop when you open in the morning that says something like "Workers of the World Unite." It's a way of you signaling, saying, I'm in compliance. I'm thinking the right thoughts. And even if I'm not thinking them, I'm saying the right things. And he's saying, take the sign out of the window. Start telling the truth. I applaud that. That is what ultimately can set us free. But I don't know how much truth there is in what Trump is doing. I don't think there's very much, except raw truth. And the only truth, I think, is that he gets what he wants because he has the military power, backed up by compliance from the people. Not just compliance, but I'd say at least half of America outright supporting him, cheering for what he's doing, which is not democratic. Carney called that out yesterday. He's calling it a rupture. Not reform or evolution, but a rupture. He says countries and companies should stop pretending their foreign policies are values-based, as he put it. And he's using that phrase, New World Order, but is it a New World Order of his making, or is he participating in the formation and creation of this New World Order, or is he just a recipient of it, someone like the rest of us who is being forced to live within it and live within the guardrails of it, within the prison of it, if you want to look at it that way, the mind prison, the real prison for some people. This new world order that is unfolding as the sovereignty of nations is being threatened and is about, and in many cases maybe about to dissolve. Among those nations, Canada itself. And here's Mark Carney yesterday.
Friends, it is time for companies and countries to take their signs down. For decades, countries like Canada prospered under what we called the rules-based international order. We joined its institutions, we praised its principles, we benefited from its predictability. And because of that, we could pursue values-based foreign policies under its protection. We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. This fiction was useful, and American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window. We participated in the rituals, and we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
Mm-hmm. And so suddenly, even first world nations that are medium or secondary powers like Canada are falling victim to the power, falling prey to the coercion of the power of the superpowers. Russia, now China as well, and the United States. And, you know, through the entirety of this rules-based international order, the superpowers have always had exemptions, vetoes in international courts, exemptions from human rights abuses, called into question internationally when war crimes are committed, for instance, whether it's Bush or Putin or maybe even Donald Trump blowing up boats that he claims are under power and control of narco-terrorists with no real proof. But if you try to take them to court, who's going to arrest them? When it comes time to vote on human rights abuses or issues at the UN, both of the superpowers, Russia, the United States, they have vetoes. They can just say, nope. So, well, Donald Trump says that the UN is dysfunctional and a lot of these world organizations are dysfunctional. It's maybe dysfunctional in part because the superpowers don't have to fully participate. They're not held accountable. And so Mark Carney was kind of calling some of that out yesterday. And it goes beyond that. It's about trade, too. He's talking about these trade deals that, you know, through GATT and other mechanisms where trade is arbitrated, disputes are arbitrated. He's saying even there's some fakery going on because the mighty really are favored. And he's going to pay a price for that. He is paying a price for it because Trump called Carney out and said, hey, Mark, I watched you yesterday and you weren't very grateful to the United States. So Carney scored points in the court of international opinion, but now he may suffer the wrath of Donald J. Trump for saying some things that displeased the almighty Don.
Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your prime minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful.
Ouch. See, not so easy to live next door to Godzilla. Is what he's saying true? Would Canada cease to exist if not for the United States protecting us? Maybe. But then again, if the United States hadn't been there after World War II, if they hadn't, I think, really been thrust into the position of world leadership alone, or not really alone, that's not the right word, into a position of leadership carrying the burden and the responsibility of possessing the world's largest nuclear arsenal, or one of, then other countries would have had those weapons too, maybe even Canada. You know, for a time, Canada did have nuclear missiles up in the Arctic, jointly controlled with the United States. They're not there now. Kind of like Ukraine. A lot of countries living next door to a superpower: Finland, Poland, Canada, Cuba. Well, there's one. Defiant. Look what happened there when they put missiles into Cuba. Maybe it's not just missiles, maybe it's the trade, right? Can't have Canada doing too much trade with China, and that's kind of where we're going. And Trump says, oh, that's a good thing. You should get a deal with China if you can get one. But I'm not so sure that he means it. Here's Steve Bannon again, and I think, you know, when he speaks, I think you should listen. Because even though he's not like visibly in the inner circle of, you know, the Trump administration, he does have the inside track. He's got his ear to the ground, and I think to some degree he even has the ear of the president. Although they had something of a falling out a while back, he did pardon Bannon, and when he talks, he's got this down. He knows the plan, and now he's like many other social media influencers out there, Bannon himself, along with the president, targeting Carney.
President Trump called this brother out to his face at Davos. He had a funny story about Macron. It's the reason Macron left. He had a funny story about Macron, about how weak and sad he is. But Carney, he looked right at him and said, hey, bro, we essentially defend you. And remember that before you start, you know, before you talk smack, again, remember, we have your defense. And people in Canada have to understand this. We have paid for your defense for decade after decade and a decade. And what did I say 6 or 9 months ago? That Canada is potentially the next Ukraine. That Arctic North, the Chinese Communist Party and Russia, the great game of the 21st century is in the Arctic. Why in the hell you think Trump, who can think this stuff through, as much as he's doing in Latin America with the bailout of Argentina and the situation in Venezuela and trying to control the oil from Guyana to Venezuela to the Gulf of America, Mexico, and Texas to get you the biggest oil power known in history by 10x. He's spending so much time in Greenland. He understands the strategic importance of it. President Trump, I believe, is the greatest strategic thinker and man of action we've ever had in the presidency. This is why I say Washington, Lincoln, and Trump. And you saw it today. And he called Carney out to his face. Said, bro, watch the smack talk, because we are basically your protector.
Yeah, maybe running a protection racket. Kinda. Yeah, look at Ukraine. What the hell's really going on there? Like, really, it's pretty gross. If if you're editorializing, a little bit of speculation here, observation, analysis, that's the better word. You have a war. If I go to war and I'm a world leader, I want to go to war to win. I don't want to mess around. And if I'm going to help somebody win a war, the ethical, moral thing to do is to go all in and win the damn thing and minimize the number of casualties. But that's not what's going on in Ukraine. It's been a steady drip, drip, drip of weapons slowly coming in over time. A lot of politics being played, giving them just enough to kind of keep the Russians at bay from pushing on through, breaking through the lines. Just keep it going. And it's gone on for years. And the death toll on both sides, as Trump keeps pointing out, is horrific. It just keeps on climbing. But they don't finish it. They don't bring it to a conclusion through negotiation, and they don't bring it to a conclusion by going all in and just arming to the teeth and saying, the hell with this. And even maybe just by doing that, that would be enough of a deterrent to one side or the other to say, hey, that's it. We quit. Why? A lot of money to be made. That might be one motivating factor. I hate to be a conspiracy theorist that way, but there's a lot of money to be made and a lot of weapons to test, field test, at human expense. And I think there are some people who are that sick and that evil in our world who want these things to linger, to drag on, while the little people pay the ultimate price. Because it's the little people, not the oligarchs, not the millionaires and billionaires, really the billionaire class these days. They're the ones who benefit. And in the end, that's a lot of what is decided too, like who gets to own what at the end of it, what assets are carved up, handed off. That's going on in the United States right now too. As people, politicians, the Trump family enriches itself. And the little people pay the price. And all the little people want is a life. And they really do fight because they love their country, because they want their sovereignty, the right to self-determination, to live life on their terms the way they want to live free, right? That's what we want. That's what I want. Whatever freedom means. Can never get a straight answer out of people, though. I know what it means to me in many respects, but I don't know what it means to you. That's a question I think every individual has to answer. What is it you want? And it drags on and on and on, and the blood continues to flow. And Trump could end it tomorrow, I think. I think he really could end it in 24 hours or less if he really, really wanted to, but he doesn't care. Well, he says that he does. And I think it's the same on the other side with Putin. And he faces a lot of the same pressures and realities that Trump does. Because they have a military industrial complex on their side too. And an oligarchical class, the elites. It's a mirror image in many ways, but maybe not a complete mirror image, because I don't think a lot of it's in reverse. I think it's just maybe a carbon copy with some subtle changes. That's maybe not the best metaphor, but I think you get my point. 1984, George Orwell. Welcome to the New World Order.
Maverick News isn't just a news outlet, it's a community of truth seekers. Your donation at freedomreporters.com fuels our mission to report the stories that mainstream media won't touch. Thank you, Maverick family.
It's strange how the New World Order seems so much like the Old World Order. Because the new boss Seems to be doing a lot of the same things as the old boss. But maybe not entirely the same, because now he's going after friends and allies. Here's David Eby, Premier of British Columbia, Canada, saying that Mark Carney's words yesterday could cost Canada. Big time, bigly.
On it earlier, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts about Mark Carney's speech in Davos and then Donald Trump's comments this morning.
Yeah, I listened to the Prime Minister's speech with a sense of relief and pride. Relief that the Prime Minister is saying what we have to say, and that he is charting a course that we have to chart. We need to align ourselves with other countries that share our priorities, that protect Canadian sovereignty and that value that, and where we value their sovereignty and support them as well. This is just, there is a significant rupture, as he described it, in the international order. And as a middle power, Canada needs to find like-minded countries to stand with. This is absolutely crucial. The pride in the sense that I believe that British Columbia is going to play a key role in what the Prime Minister is charting out here. When I was in India, it was very obvious to me that we have a huge role to play in deepening our relationship with that country. When I was in Asia, visiting Korea, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, the same. And I know that British Columbia will play a crucial role in helping realize this vision the Prime Minister has set out for the country, which I am fully supportive of.
Penny, do you have a follow-up?
Are we screwed, David?
I do, yeah. I just wonder if, Trump's comments this morning were rather bellicose. I wonder if that is going to change your strategy and approach. And as to add a little bit of extra onto that question, last year you were urging British Columbians to stay home during spring break travel. I know a lot of families are kind of looking at their plans right now and finalizing things. And are you sharing that same message with them again this year?
Yeah, thanks, Penny. I don't know if people have seen it, but I looked at a graphic posted by the president with an American flag superimposed on our country. I even struggle now for the words to describe the mix of emotions. There is no question but that the Prime Minister's speech will have trade consequences in terms of our relationship with the United States. But those trade consequences are minimal compared to the larger term consequences of giving up our sovereignty as a country and not standing bravely as Canadians have for generations for this beautiful country that we live in. So I feel that there is an urgency and an essential requirement that the Prime Minister and Canadians step up in this moment, and that may involve sacrifice, and that our government will do all we can to offset that through the work that we're doing in partnership with the federal government and with other countries. I certainly urge British Columbians and all Canadians to stay home or to travel at home or to travel to other countries rather than the U.S. The message is being received by the United States. They are feeling it. They're feeling fewer tourists coming to their country. The refusal to purchase and sell U.S. alcohol has been heard and is creating anxiety in the United States. And it is not meant to hurt everyday Americans. It's meant to send a message that, at least from my perspective, that as Canadians, we're going to do all we can to support other Canadians. Recognize there's essential travel people are going to do. They're going to visit relatives, all these other things. But if you have a choice of where you're going to go on vacation, I really encourage people to look somewhere else.
Mr. Premier, do you think what the Prime Minister says is going to piss Donald Trump off? Well, I was watching the video yesterday online, and I was very proud of what the Prime Minister had to say. And then I saw he had a map in his office, and he had the American flag over our country, at which point I realized we're effed. I'm so proud, though. But giving up our sovereignty in the face of the threat of Godzilla stomping on us and squeezing the snot out of Canada. But beyond that, I think everything's going to be okay. Just don't travel to the United States. Oh, my God. What? What the hell? What the F is going on? Seriously, what the hell is going on? I think we're effed. Yeah, I'm pretty sure of it. But at least we're standing up to Godzilla. And we're not stocking American liquor in the LCBO government stores in Ontario anymore. So we got her. We got this. Maybe. I don't know. I just don't know. But it's okay, though, because he said he's not going to use military force on us. Or maybe he was just meaning Greenland. Maybe now he's really pissed at us. So, I kind of thought the Doug Ford thing, which was accurate. It was accurate. That ad was accurate. Anybody telling you that the use of the Reagan video in that anti-tariff ad from Ontario and the Premier, Doug Ford, no, it was accurate. Trump just didn't like it. He just didn't like it because it told the truth. And it also exposed the fact that Reagan and Trump are not the same. But anyway, here's this dude with Governor BOMBSHELL talking about the way Ontario and much of Canada is now saying no to U.S. alcohol.
He basically said Canada owes its existence to the United States.
That was hugely disrespectful. And you now understand why Canadians have stopped buying American products like bourbon, why they stopped going to tourist destinations like Las Vegas. Every state can tell you how much their economy is losing because of those comments. But I think about the speech both in terms of how detached it was from what's going on in the United States. He claimed that inflation was under control, that our economy was doing great. So that is not understanding or acknowledging the financial insecurity of our families. But then he makes our country less secure based on calling into question global alliances that the rest of the world needs to believe that we are 100% committed to.
He basically said Canada.
Yeah. Yeah, but we're still left. Because Godzilla is really big and he breathes fire. And it's scary. That's my political analysis. Godzilla is big and scary and breathes fire. And we got to be really careful. Duck and cover, folks, because Donald Trump just makes stuff up as he goes along in order to justify everything that he's doing or wants to do. And BOMBSHELL was right. Like in his speech today, he was making up numbers. $18 trillion in new investment coming in. It's not even close to that. That's it. If there is as much, it could maybe half that, maybe half, which is still a lot, but not 18 trillion, not by a long stretch. And I even doubt that it's 9, because you have frameworks for deals, frameworks for investment, memorandums of understanding, and we'll see if any of that stuff bears fruit in the long run. It's going to take years for a lot of this stuff to be built out. And then he was talking about being in Switzerland, you have the watch industry, $30 billion watch industry. Trump stands up there this morning and says, well, this afternoon there, morning here, and he says, that the United States has this huge trade deficit with Switzerland because of this $30 billion, because the United States buys $30 billion worth of Swiss watches. That's also not true. Yeah, he's looking at the entire output of the Swiss watch industry, all the Rolexes and all the other Swiss watches combined, sold into the world market every year. It's about $30 billion. Huge business for Switzerland, right? They make really high-tech, sophisticated, high-quality gadgets, watches, and other things. And I think that the watch industry itself, I don't know what percentage of the GDP it makes up. Probably, I'm not going to say the number because I'm guessing, but it doesn't make up like the bulk of it. But the United States does not buy all $30 billion worth of Swiss watches. That's the worldwide output. That's what goes to the whole global market. The United States buys about 16% of those watches, maybe 16 to 18%. But Trump claimed it all. See how nice we are to you in Switzerland? And here he is talking to the president of Switzerland about this today. Let me get you the clip. He talked about the watches in his speech, but you know what it is? Everything with Trump, the way he views the world, is very much like a cliche, very much like a television show. So what's Switzerland known for? Watches. Oh, they make great watches. So in his mind, everything is about watches in Switzerland. But that's just one aspect of it. Oh, yeah, and because the United States subsidizes and pays for everything for everybody, they buy all the watches.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. And I will say you do have a great ambassador. And she will, she keeps her husband very much in line. She doesn't play games, right, Newt? She keeps him in line. He's over here also. I want to thank my team for having worked out a very fair deal with Switzerland, and it's an honor. I speak about you often. You're a great country, a beautiful country. You do make great watches, too. That I can say. There's nobody like you for watches, which is a big deal. But I appreciate the treatment we've been given, and we will always reciprocate. And thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, it's true. They do make great watches. But the United States doesn't buy them all. It's just kind of funny and scary at the same time. Here's Gavin Newsom. This even scares me a little bit. I don't think I've got the clip lined up here, but during Trump's speech today, Gavin Newsom was there. He was standing in the audience, and there is video of him from a distance. I should have queued it up. And he's with some people, and they're making faces, and you can see how he's seething, right? He's so upset. You can see he's just ready to spit nails. And then came out and spoke to the media as well, because Gavin Newsom wants Trump's job in the worst way. And here he is on CNN.
Speech. You were obviously named by President Trump during that speech. Yeah. What was your reaction to what he had to say about you?
None. I think he said something very different last night. I didn't hear new scum. I heard new green scam. Come on. It was remarkably boring. It was remarkably insignificant. He was never going to invade Greenland. It was never real. So that was always a fade. And so he says, well, we should negotiate. Well, everybody here has been willing to negotiate for a year. So it had fire and fury, signified absolutely nothing. Even by Trump standards, I was rather curious. And there was boorish parts of it, but those were not even that consequential, including name-checking people he likes, people he didn't like. So, I was a little disappointed. It was a little nonplussed.
Did it stand out to you that he said Iceland multiple times when he was talking about Greenland?
And that every time a windmill turns, it costs $1,000. A lot of stuff stands out. None of this is normalized.
That's true.
There's a normalization of deviancy and consciousness and, comments and commentary. No other president, he's held to the curve. He's graded on a curve. I mean, it's really some jaw-dropping and remarkable statements that just, fly in the face of facts and evidence and common sense. So, but you've heard them over and over and over again. For the European audience, that may have been a new speech. My God, there wasn't anything new about that speech for the American audience. The only thing that was new is he said he's willing to negotiate, but wait a sec, that's not new either, because he's been saying we've wanted to negotiate for over a year.
You criticized world leaders when you got here, saying that some of these European leaders have capitulated to the president.
In the past.
You said you should have brought knee pads. What have you heard from them since then?
A lot. I heard a surprising number say, glad you made those comments. The exact opposite of what you might expect. They needed to hear those comments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough to stand up to Godzilla, especially if you're alone. But if you're together, if everybody's together,
Maverick News isn't just a news outlet, it's a community of truth seekers. Your donation at freedomreporters.com fuels our mission to report the stories that mainstream media won't touch. Thank you, Maverick family.
I don't know. Where's the answer? One thing this has shown me is it's highlighted the propaganda we've been fed for so many years about other countries. The reason it has highlighted this for me in a really profound way is because now it's happening to Canada. It's never happened here before. And so now, if you open your mind and open your eyes, you will see it. You will hear it. You will hear the rhetoric. You will hear the attacks on Canada's image and reputation. The inaccurate statements that Canada is a communist country. The inaccurate statements that Canada is a fascist or Nazi country. The inaccurate statements that there is no free speech in Canada at all. That's not accurate. There are limits. Maybe they go too far. Maybe they don't. But there is free speech with limits. Free speech doesn't mean a free-for-all. These same accusations have been leveled for years at other countries, especially communist countries or socialist countries. And it makes me wonder, these communist countries that we're told are so authoritarian, I wonder if some of them are even communist countries at all now. Maybe they weren't as authoritarian as we were led to believe. Maybe they were worse. Maybe they were better. I even look at what's going on in Iran right now. Accusations from Iran saying that what is happening there is the result of meddling, foreign interference from the United States and Israel. Probably truth in that. Am I thrilled with the idea of people living under a theocratic government, a regime in any country? No, but if that's what people choose, and I don't know that they do, but I don't know enough about living there, because really my perception of Iran is based on the information I'm fed every day through the media. And from what I know from having spoken with people who have lived there and others who have worked there, in some cases journalists. So there's a skewed reality that we have here that I certainly have. But is it real? Or is it Memorex? I know enough to know that I should not be so quick to pass judgment as I have been in the past, because I'm seeing it happen in real time to my own country. A pretext being created, a fake narrative of Canada being a global hub for money laundering and drug smuggling of fentanyl into the United States, when in fact the majority of that stuff flows the other way into Canada, along with a lot of guns, by the way. And so I know that these statements being made about my country now are false, not truthful. And I see the same arguments being used against Greenland, where they are using this kind of rhetoric to ramp up a separatist movement there. I'm seeing these same kinds of arguments, statements being made against Venezuela, where they're moving U.S. oil companies in to effectively steal the natural resources of the people. Same arguments, the same strategy being used here in Canada, where the people out in Alberta are being convinced that somehow there's a pot of gold at the end of this referendum rainbow. And yet I think when they slide down that rainbow and land, the sun will suddenly go dark, the prism in the sky will disappear, and the pot of gold that was supposed to be there will be scooped up by big corporate interests from another country. Or maybe their country, because they'll be absorbed by that country and the riches that they've been promised will evaporate. Just as the people in Greenland, I think, are catching on to the scam. We'll pay you $10,000 to $50,000 a piece. All you have to do is support Donald Trump taking over the country. Well, where's that money coming from? It's their own money. Sell out your country so I can steal everything and then I'll give you this much back. It's a tax rebate. A grant of your own money. I'm going to give you this much money that I'm taking from your country's future, your children's future, your grandchildren's, your great-great-grandchildren's, and their great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. That's what they're doing. That's what he's trying to do. What is this deal, though? I don't know what the deal is. It's a great deal. It goes to infinity. Thank you, Buzz Lightyear. I don't believe that. Do you believe that? That he's got a deal for infinity? But it's a deal. It's framework for a deal. Show me the details and show me in writing and show me the signatures. Until then, I don't know what the hell we're dealing with. And all this reaction is noise, political rhetoric. Gavin Newsom, everything he's just said there. He's thinking, what can I say to criticize Trump? What do I have to say to take the opposite position and make him look bad? Well, after Trump stood up at the podium and called out Newsom and called out Carney and gave a speech that, what words came to mind? Tough guy. Stood up there. He's a real tough guy. Tough talk from a tough guy. Yeah. How about you, how about you drop the nukes and the F-35s and level the playing field, and then we'll see how tough you are. You and whose army? The United States Army. Okay, Godzilla's on the rampage. They're talking about everything over there, though, at the WEF Forum 2026, building AI for the long term, talking a lot about, that's a major subject, and that's driving a lot of the change that's happening in the world because the technology itself is disruptive and they'll need a lot of energy to power that stuff. I'm going to come back to that. I don't think I'm going to talk about it tonight, but again, overnight as I was sleeping and thinking, and then I woke up with a revelation of sorts. I thought about it this way before, but it was more fully formed. A lot of what we're seeing going on with Trump and the reshaping of the world is being driven by technology, AI, social media. This is the new information, artificial intelligence revolution. And it is as disruptive to the world as the Industrial Revolution was, probably more so. And as a result, you're seeing a shift or an effort to shift the geopolitical landscape, like the physical borders. and consolidate control as this race towards some sort of, I don't know, singularity really just begins. Yeah, this is just the beginning. And we don't even know where this journey is going to take us. So when Trump says this deal on Greenland is for infinity, no, this is just the beginning of something. And this guy, he's not going to be here very much longer. He just finished off year one of a 4-year term. He has 2 years left, and then it's a year of campaigning. And in the third year, he'll push right to the end with his agenda to get as much stuff rammed through as he can. He's going to make there's going to be a lot of disruption over the next 3, but really the next 2.5. So that's what that's what we all have to survive in terms of, for those of you who would like to preserve Canada or whatever country you're living in as a nation state and preserve your sovereignty. It's not going to be easy. Or maybe the illusion of sovereignty, because if you're living right next door to the United States, as we are, maybe you do bend the knee. And maybe Mark Carney is saying these things because he is part of the plan. Because maybe he has to. Maybe all of this was fake. Maybe he didn't even mean what he said. I think he did mean it. I think he did stand up to Trump, and I think he did dig in his heels, and I think it did take courage to do it. And I think he showed the world that you can stand up to Godzilla and maybe survive. But he's going to need help. He's going to need courage, others to do it too. He's going to need Doug Ford, who today was talking about EVs, electric vehicles. But that's also, we'll come back to that, because China, that was one of the main topics one of the main other topics at another one of the sessions involving a panel at the World Economic Forum today. I'm just going to dip into this for just a moment, where they were talking about the U.S., China, and where all of this is going to land.
As you saw it.
Well, it went off in many different directions, as he's inclined to do, and but there was one big message for the Europeans in particular, but for all of us, which is that after having threatened to do whatever was required to acquire Greenland, including using military force, and even using mafioso language, that we're going to either do this the hard way or the easy way, he took the gun off the table and said, we're not going to use military force to coerce Greenland or Denmark. Now, again, it's a pretty strange world in which an ally has been threatening to use military force against another ally. So that world we're already in. That fact has already occurred. But the fact that he took it off the table, I think, is a big and significant factor. Second point, he made go clear over and over, he is really serious about acquiring Greenland. And so he says Greenland is just a big chunk of ice. It's relevant for the U.S. and not particularly relevant for Denmark or for the Greenlanders. It's, he says, needed for American national security. Myself, I don't know I cannot see the argument for that, but that's his claim. And that the Europeans have never been grateful to the U.S. for all the things that we've done for them. And then he has a litany about the fact, which is roughly correct, that the U.S. has essentially been the defensive shield for Europe ever since World War II, and the Europeans have been free riders to some considerable extent. So they owe us something. Mm-hmm. So they should remember all the good things we did for them, and what they can do for us is give us Greenland. And then he said, I'm still thinking this is going to work out okay, and if the Europeans find a way to fulfill my demand, I'll be grateful. And then he said, but if they don't, I'll remember.
Well, the thing that struck me, and I'm sure it struck you as well, and this will segue back into our topic for this evening, which is U.S.-China relations and where the two countries will land, is how far he mentioned or didn't mention China throughout the speech. In any case, let's get back to the topic at hand.
Just one footnote on that one. I think for those, especially since of China, so he only referred to 3 or 4 leaders in the whole speech. In the case of the Europeans, for both Macron and for our Canadian colleague Carney, he had very negative things to say, basically demeaning, in effect, But when he said Xi, his eyes light up a little bit, and he says, I have a great relationship with Xi. I greatly respect Xi. He's brilliant. So he was off on that track. So he clearly distinguishes between Xi and his relationship with Xi and his relationship with a country and a leader that happens to be our neighbor, Canada, or France, which was the country that came to our rescue in the revolution. So I would say that's interesting, just as we're trying to grade or gauge him on his relationships with other leaders.
So as we look to what will happen this year, 2026, as far as we can, and maybe a little bit beyond, it's quite stark that it's now sort of 9 years since your book on the Thucydides trap. And maybe if we frame how things have evolved since then, the first Trump administration, and then the Biden administration, and now the first year of the Trump administration, how have you seen the US-China sort of dynamic evolve in that time that will give you some sense of where we're headed in 2026?
I have a difficulty with professors because they start talking, as one of my colleagues said, 50-minute sound bites. So let me just be very brief. I would say Thucydides nailed it. Okay, if we're trying to think about the relationship between the U.S. and China, Thucydides' insight is the central starting point, and that insight is that a rapidly rising China that seriously threatens America's a colossal ruling U.S. and its position at the top of every pecking order. This basically rapid shift in the seesaw of power is discombobulating the entire relationship and actually the international order that was reflected before that. And in ways, as Thucydides explained very well, that magnify misunderstandings and multiply miscalculations and amplify incidents or accidents that would otherwise be inconsequential that often end in a war. So I would say his picture's still right. These are structural realities that Xi now and Trump have to grapple with. And the promising thing in this context is that Trump understands war is terrible. Again, that's a good thing for a president to understand. And nuclear war is really, really, really bad. And that's a good thing for a president to understand. So that's basically coming into a world in which two parties who can't have a war that might destroy themselves will have to find some other way. And I would say that's a promising start.
The thing is, so much has changed, even if you talk about it at a structural level in the last 10, 15 years. And this is where I want to bring in Senator Coons. You've been in the Senate since 2010. You've seen how the relationship has evolved in the last 10, 15 years. Give us a sense too of how you yourself have seen that and where you think the road lies ahead. You've spoken about the need for both parties to coexist, to compete at the same time, but also to cooperate. Are you still optimistic that that is possible? And do you think in the U.S. Senate and administration and beyond, that there is hope of a bipartisan sort of support for the three things that you spoke about?
Well, thank you. There is actually bipartisan support for a clear-eyed engagement with China, strong support for our regional allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific, and for taking the steps needed to further secure the United States and its position in the region. Unfortunately, I think President Trump's remarks tonight, his general approach, and his conduct of the last year pulls in a different direction. The national security strategy does not correctly or clearly see China as it stands in relation to us in the world. And President Trump made clear tonight, as he's made clear in the last year, he doesn't have a fundamental appreciation that what has kept the United States strong and prosperous and secure, and what has largely kept the peace in Europe for 75 years, is a remarkable global network of allies who share core values and who are committed to building out a global order based on territorial respect, self-determination, freedom of navigation, rules of law, that sort of thing. President Trump last year on Liberation Day announced a chaotic mishmash of tariffs of wildly varying rates on all sorts of countries. I was in Taiwan not long before that, and the Philippines, and I've also visited with leaders in Korea and Japan right around that time. Many of them making major investments in the United States in manufacturing. Many of them doing their best to demonstrate to the Trump administration their interest in a closer alignment, and yet they were hit with 30 or 40 or 50% tariffs and had trouble understanding why and how and processing it. I think we need more predictable, more clear policy. President Trump believes strongly in national defense. He recently announced he intends to try and add another $500 billion to our defense budget, and that he thinks having the strongest military in the world is the thing that will help keep the peace. I do think a robust military is important, but I think the soft power side of things, if I could quote a great professor, is also important. And when we hand away what has been a 50-year advantage in our global leadership in public health, in education, in combating climate change, in protecting against pandemics, when we say, nope, we're going to shut down USAID, we're going to cancel a lot of our core relationships, we create opportunities. So I do think that there are opportunities for us to establish a framework to work with China. I do think the most pressing issue for all of us is AI and how AI will be used both in a military context and in business. And understanding each other in a mature, balanced, and clear-eyed way is a critical part of our advancing our security as well as the regions and the world.
I'll get back to the point about both countries being able to sort of cooperate on a tactical and issue-specific basis, but let's get back to that. Maybe I'll jump to Professor Zhao now and maybe make you do a few things. Firstly, your own take on the speech just now, but also how do you think the Chinese government is increasingly evolving its own thinking about President Trump's approach, not just from this evening, but also on what's happened with Venezuela, with Greenland, and bearing in mind also April, the meeting in April this year. What do you think, bearing all that in mind, is a reasonable outcome that we can all expect in April?
Well, that's a lot to unpack. Thank you first. I think I don't want to comment generally on President Trump's speech. I want to focus on the part where he mentioned China. Basically, there are 3 times he mentioned China, and you can see that that's generally the problem between U.S. and China. The first time he mentioned China, he said there's no wind farm in China, which is totally false. But you can take that as a symbol that there's a general misperception of China in the United States. There's less people traveled, less knowledge about China, particularly contemporary China. Second time when President Trump mentioned China, basically he said he wants to dominate AI and also crypto, leaving China sort of outside the game or keep China down. So that's the second problem, where China believing win-win cooperation, the United States only believe in zero sum. And the third problem, of course, if you look at that positively, President Trump praised President Xi and said he has good relationship with President Xi. But the question was, in which part U.S. and China can cooperate? He stopped short of mentioning specifics. So that means other than personal sort of close relationship claims, there's no concrete agenda of cooperating with China. So I would appreciate Senator Kuhn's suggestion that we should establish a framework. And that's President Xi's suggestion that from the very beginning, we need to have guidelines, we need to have framework, but we also needs to have mechanisms on every level to improve cooperation between the 2 countries. So back to your final question, which is what about April? Of course, the world is focusing on the April visits, and I think behind the scenes there are multiple connections. And just yesterday, the 2 economic teams had another talk with each other. So they're preparing for April, and hopefully there will be concrete deliverables out of that meeting. But right now, from China's perspective, is that President Trump's very much focused on is domestic issues, and basically expand its domestic issues into global issues, like the Western Hemisphere on drug, immigration, and all kinds of issues. And for China, his demand is on fentanyl, and China is willing to help, but don't know exactly where is the boundary, like how can China provide more assistance. So, and also he demands China to purchase more, but when China wants to invest in the U.S., there's still no parameter exactly how China can, like other countries, invest in the U.S. So there are many issues still on the table. There still needs to be ironed out exactly what to do next. But I think people's hopes are up, and because next year, other than April, there will be other opportunities for President Xi to visit the U.S. and also G20, APEC. So hopefully this continuous dialogue between the two top leaders will maintain at least the stability of the bilateral relationship. And on top of that, we can improve our strategic reassurance and having more trust between the two countries.
You know, the gentleman.
Okay. I'm gonna continue this the other side of this, and then we're gonna talk about the auto industry in Ontario, because that is being affected very much by China. Stay with me.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, let's go back for just a moment longer.
Intriguing and varied experiences as far as the US and China are concerned, and US-China relations, even sitting from where you are now. And by April, you'll probably be, in case you don't know, be observing things from a different perch. So as far as you are able, can you give us your perspective on what you think would be a realistic outcome from April?
I think to go to the points made by my Chinese colleague and by Graham Allison and Chris before me, the core challenge is there a bilateral relationship management mechanism possible, and what is its framework? Either A, you have what I've called for a long time managed strategic competition, accepting the reality of that competition, however uncomfortable politically sometimes that sounds in domestic audiences. B, unmanaged strategic competition, which can end in crisis, conflict and war. Or C, you ultimately just stand back and wait for Graham's thucidity and logic to unfold with all of its problematic consequences. So, I mean, looking therefore at those general possibilities, what I sense, and this is me as a private scholar, not as ambassador in Washington, just thinking it through. One, both sides at this stage exhibit an interest in stabilizing the relationship for different but partly overlapping reasons. For the year ahead, I don't think you can project beyond that. And each has different reasons for doing that. Two, that therefore brings us down to the core terrain. Well, how could you manage this and on what issues which are real? There are the three T's: tariffs, technology, and Taiwan. If you were to go to the core of where these interests actually intersect and or run into each other. What is possible on those core three, I do not know. And the United States side, I'm sure the Chinese side, including here in Davos, are working their way through at least the first two of those. The attitude from Beijing, because this is the sound of two hands clapping, it's not the sound of one hand clapping, is of itself obviously relevant. What I see underneath the Chinese posture towards not only the April summit, but more generally in the status of US-China relations, is unprecedented levels of Chinese self-confidence. This is palpable when you read the internal Chinese literature. It's transparent when you read your People's Daily. It's transparent when you read the theoretical literature, which the party engages in its own code language communications with itself. That Dongsheng Xijiang, the rise of the East and the decline of the West, which is a euphemism for the rise of China and the decline of the United States. So whereas China is in search of a stabilization arrangement, it actually, in its own internal political literature, believes it's prevailing in this competition at present. So where does this land, given those overall dynamics? That is being determined by a combination of He Lifeng and Scott Bessent, who actually will be charged with the PrepComs. But that, I think, is the terrain for the discussion and the options which are available.
But Angela, then, to close us.
Okay. Enough of that for now. Back to Canada and Ontario, where the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, held a news conference today along with representatives from the auto sector. They were speaking with reporters in Toronto, commenting on the federal government's electric vehicle deal with China and its possible impact, or whatever impact it's going to have on the domestic auto industry. So under the agreement, Canada is going to permit about 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into Canada each year, reducing the tariff of 100% to just 6.1%. And in exchange, China is going to reduce tariffs on Canadian canola from 84% to 15%. So in this news conference today, we had Lana Payne, the national president of Unifor, which is the union which represents auto workers in Canada, Brian Kingston, president and CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, and Flavio Volpe, president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. So let's pick this up here. And Carney's speech yesterday, again, it drove a little bit of a wedge, I think, between Ford and the Prime Minister because there was no consultation beforehand. But in any event, here we go.
Next is the national president of Unifor, a prodigious Canadian who has been a very good partner in giving this message, sending this message around the world, but also right down to the shop floor. Lana Payne.
Good morning, and thank you to Premier Ford and to my partners here in the auto industry for this invitation to be here today, along with obviously Flavio and Brian. As you all know, Unifor is Canada's largest private sector union with 320,000 members in every sector of the economy, including 40,000 in the auto sector right here in Ontario. And like so many workers who've been impacted by the tariffs from the Trump administration, auto workers are extremely, extremely worried about their future. We have been building vehicles in this country for more than 100 years. Our members are proud of what they do. As long as Canadians want to buy cars and trucks, we want to build them right here in Canada. Auto workers have been on the front lines of this trade war since last February, fighting to protect their jobs, their plants, and their communities. And that's why this China deal is a hard pill for them to swallow right now, because they've seen this movie before, where their jobs end up on the chopping block because of some trade negotiation. Opening up the Canadian market to cheap China-owned EVs worsens the situation we have already, where more and more countries in Canada. We cannot sustain an auto industry or the jobs that depend on it if vehicles are no longer built here. Given China's massive, and I say massive, overcapacity in EV production, there is little reason for those companies to establish real and meaningful manufacturing operations in our country. As of today, we have given market access without guarantees or any real commitments. And even if investment were to materialize. Experience in other parts of the world shows the core supply chain remains in China, supported by heavy state subsidies, as Flavio has said, very, very low wages, and suspect labor conditions, while parts are shipped in for final assembly. This model creates few jobs and fails to establish a meaningful or durable industrial base. Look, there's no sugarcoating this. We are in the fight of our lives here, fending off Trump's tariffs, and that fight just got a little harder. We must collectively come together to stabilize and protect the auto sector we have so we can actually have a future one. It is, after all, foundational to an advanced manufacturing sector in this country and indeed our entire industrial economy. Failing to defend today's auto jobs and supply chains and manufacturing capacity means surrendering the future of the industry altogether. And it is workers, the people who I represent, who will pay the heaviest price. Indeed, they are already paying the heaviest price. Right now, 2 Canadian auto plants are currently idled. GM Cami Assembly in Ingersoll and Stellantis Brampton Assembly. We were on a path to build affordable EVs at Brampton, but that also means we must all work together to make Stellantis live up to its commitment. We have been building the EV future with investments in places like Windsor at the Nexstar battery plant and in St. Thomas with PowerCo's facility. Yet, right now, nearly 4,000 uniform members are without work, with further losses rippling throughout the supply chain. In addition to Ingersoll and Brampton, the upcoming elimination of a shift at General Motors in Oshawa will impact more than 1,000 workers at that assembly plant and also along the auto parts chain. It's devastating out there. And yes, the root of the problem are Trump's tariffs. Make no mistake about that. No one has been clearer about that than this union from day one to today. The immediate priority for all of us, for the auto sector, must be to get these plants back into operation and stabilize this sector for the workers who depend on it. That must be job one. The federal government is expected to announce details of a new auto policy in the coming weeks, and we know that Minister Jolie has been working very hard at this. Automakers that build and assemble vehicles and support jobs in Canada should be rewarded as long as they live up to their commitments to the workers of Canada. But the free ride has to end for companies that enjoy full access to our markets while investing nothing in Canadian production. Today, more than 40% of the cars and trucks sold in Canada are made by automakers with zero, absolutely zero manufacturing footprint here. That is not sustainable. The China deal just made that situation worse. Any credible federal auto policy must come down to a simple rule. If you want to sell vehicles in Canada, you need to build in Canada and employ Canadian workers. This is our message as a union, and we're sending it loud and clear on behalf of the tens and thousands of Canadian auto workers who are depending on action. Now, I'd like to turn things over to Premier Doug Ford, who has been fighting every single day with us to defend this auto industry and the jobs of auto workers all across this province. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Laura. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking our guests. You just heard from Lana Payne, Unifor National President, Flavio Volpe, President of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, and Brian Kingston, President and CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Together, Lana, Flavio, and Brian represent the workers, the automakers, and parts makers across the auto supply chain. This is an industry that employs 500,000 workers, many of them unionized, and contributes nearly $16 billion to Canada's economy. Together, we're sending a united message about the need to stand up in defense of Canada's economy, our auto workers, and workers across our great province. Over the last few days, we've watched as President Trump has threatened Greenland, he's threatened Canada, he's threatened NATO allies. President Trump remains relentless in his campaign to create a more unstable, unsafe, and uncertain world. There's never been a more important time for Team Canada to stay united. There's never been a more important time to deliver on our plan to protect Ontario. Last week, Prime Minister Carney announced a deal with China that will allow thousands of cheap, made-in-China electric vehicles into Canada's market. I've been clear about my concerns with this deal. By opening up our country to a flood of cheap, made-in-China vehicles, the federal government is asking Canadian auto workers to compete on unfair ground. We've seen what happens when cheap Chinese vehicles enter Western markets. Factories have closed, workers have lost their jobs. That's the risk this deal is creating right here in Ontario. In exchange for opening Canada up to this flood of cheap Chinese vehicles, the federal government got nothing, absolutely nothing in return for Canadian auto workers. And that's why we're here today. My focus and the focus of the leaders with me today is to find a solution that works for all Canadians. We need to find a path forward that protects Canadian auto workers and good-paying union jobs. Instead of importing vehicles, we should be making vehicles by Canadian workers, using Canadian steel, respecting Canadian specs and standards, leveraging Canada's supply chain. And if the Chinese are serious about making investments and creating auto jobs here in Canada, then show us proof. Canadian auto workers can't feed their families with hypothetical commitments about investments that might happen 5 years or a decade from now. They need concrete investments that will create jobs now and support Canadian workers and their families. These investments should be at the heart of any deal between Canada and China. If the federal government had consulted Ontario or the leaders who are here with me today, we would have made that very, very clear. That's why my message to Prime Minister Carney: consult us, work with us, help us protect Canadian auto workers together as United Team Canada. That starts with eliminating the federal electric vehicle mandate, which is only making our auto sector less competitive. We need to align Canada's regulations with key trading partners and scrap federal fees that make it more expensive to build and buy made-in-Ontario vehicles. Our auto sector is under attack. Hundreds of thousands of good-paying, unionized Canadian jobs are on the line. Let's come together. Let's support, defend, and fight for Canada's auto sector. Let's protect Canadian workers. And in a very unstable world right now that we've all seen on television, let's provide Canadians the certainty, the stability, and support they deserve. Thank you, and may God bless the people of Ontario.
We will now take questions from the media. Media present can line up behind me and ask their questions through the microphone. As a friendly reminder, the format is one question, one follow-up. Please state your name and your outlet before your question.
Premier Ford, Megan Fitzpatrick from CBC News. Did you have a chance to watch President Trump's speech this morning in Switzerland? What did you make of his comments that Canada only lives because of the U.S. and that Prime Minister Carney should have expressed more gratitude to the United States?
Well, that's typical President Trump. He goes out on the attack constantly. Maybe he should look at the Amcan fortress that we propose. We'd make two countries, the greatest two countries in the world, the strongest, the wealthiest two countries. It's disappointing to see him on a full attack. Putting the Canadian flag, I'm sorry, the American flag over Canada, over Greenland, you know, it's unacceptable the way he speaks. Why doesn't he look at the nickel, the 70% of the nickel that comes from Sudbury to keep his military going, manufacturing, and aerospace and manufacturing? Why doesn't he look at the uranium that comes from Saskatchewan and gets refined in Port Hope? Why doesn't he look at the potash that's coming from Saskatchewan to keep his farmers going? How about the aluminum coming from Quebec? That's what he should be looking at. He's fortunate to have us. We love our American friends south of the border. There's one person that's causing upheaval, not just here in Canada, but around the world, and that's President Trump. I've talked, as I've said numerous times, I've talked to Republicans, I talked to Democrats. They both feel the exact same way. You don't attack your closest friend, your closest neighbor, and your number one customer in the world. Yes, they're our number one customer, but we're their number one customer. Just alone in Ontario, 9 million Americans wake up every morning, produce a product or a widget or a service for Ontario. So maybe someone should inform him a little more than what he's being informed right now. We're critical partners on many areas in supply chains.
Premier Ford, Mark McAllister from City News. Just to follow up on that, you're very critical of Prime Minister Carney right now based on this deal with China. What did you make of his comments yesterday and his speech yesterday? He seemed to command the interest of the world in saying what he did yesterday, all the while you've been quite critical.
Well, I wouldn't say I was critical of the Prime Minister. I was very, very disappointed, as my colleagues behind me are very disappointed not to get a phone call, not to get a text message, and cutting a deal. And God bless the people in Saskatchewan. I love them out west, out east, in the fisheries. But the three of us, we have to take care of Ontario here. That's my number one job, to protect the people of Ontario. Protect their jobs, protect communities, and that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Alison Jones, Canadian Press. Just to follow up on that, you've been perhaps not critical, as you say, but disappointed in Prime Minister Carney's approach to Chinese EVs. Do you support his approach to global relations through the words that he used at Davos yesterday and the approach of sort of delivering this broadside to Trump?
You know something? 100% supportive, because I've been saying it from day one, before Prime Minister Carney even got elected last year. I was out in front of the Canadian people saying we have to diversify our trade. We have to find new partners around the world, reliable partners, democratically elected governments. That's who we need to work with. And we need to, move that forward as quickly as possible. As for investments here in Canada, in particular in Ontario, we need to see action. We need to start moving quicker. We hear a lot of talk, but we need to see results. Talk is cheap. We want to see results.
Hi, Premier Jeff Gray, Globe and Mail. Wanted just to ask you a little bit about that. We know you didn't get a heads up on the decision that the Prime Minister made with regard to China, but would it have been typical in your relationship with him to have, can you give examples of past decisions or announcements where you would have spoken in advance about something of that magnitude, something that impacted Ontario? Would you have had a conversation with him? Is that what you would have expected?
Well, we had a great relationship, and I hope we still have a great relationship. But when you don't inform someone in their number one sector that you're going to cut a deal that could, as Flavio said, would cost one full shift, where are those 50,000 jobs coming from? It's going to come from one of our assembly plants. It's just being respectful before we do anything. And if it has anything to do with the federal government, we consult, we speak to them. But just all of a sudden to get a 2-hour notice phone call that they're going out to release something, and my friends behind me, the same thing happened to them. They got the last minute call. Oh, I'm sorry, the deal is done, and this is what's happening. Unacceptable.
Could we hear that from one of them?
Sure, absolutely. Whoever wants to see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the challenge here, obviously, and by the way, we represent seafood workers in Eastern Canada, so they definitely needed relief. None of this is easy in terms of how you reach a deal with a mammoth like China. But the reality is, were there not other things that we could have been doing here to make sure that we weren't doing this in terms of what has happened around the vehicle side of things? We have been clear to the government of our position on this. We've made numerous submissions. We've been clear before they went to China that we needed to make sure that we were protecting the auto industry in any discussions over there. And of course, all of you were reporting out before the Prime Minister went to China regarding the fact of what was on the table. I mean, everyone in the world was aware of this. The point being is that we need to go into these negotiations and make sure that we are putting our best foot forward, protecting everyone that we can, but not getting caught into this situation where we're trading off one part of the country for the other, one sector for the other. If we're going to have a true Team Canada approach here, we have to be able to bring people to that conversation ahead of time. Maybe there are ways that we can, yes, influence, but maybe there's also another deal that can be had when people who understand the industry are actually providing that input. If I could carry on, I would say to you one very important thing about the Prime Minister's speech last night. There were many important things. But his call to action by middle powers in the world to come together and form an alliance to be able to in some way push back around what we are seeing from the United States right now, I believe is critically important. That is what we needed to see last year when the U.S. first launched its trade war against Canada and the world. We needed to see a coalition of the willing coming together to be able to form a fortress to be able to push back. And hopefully we are in a place where that can happen now, which can change some of the conditions of what we're seeing in terms of trade negotiations with the United States. I would also add that the cake is baking in the United States right now. Their economy is suffering, particularly their manufacturing part of their economy. The very thing that Donald Trump said that he was going to make better is actually worse because of these tariffs. Tariffs on aluminum, on steel, on the auto sector are all impacting workers in the United States right now too. So the conditions that he is dealing with in the United States are starting to change in this moment. Like many of you and like our Prime Minister, I'm very concerned about the condition that we find ourselves in the world. But that doesn't mean that we take our eye off what we have to do here in Canada, which is we have to support Canadian workers through this. We have to make sure that we have strong industrial policy that does support Canadian workers, and that's where we need to keep our focus. And we have to be aware that trading off one sector for the other in Canada is going to leave at least one sector very unhappy, and in this case, a very big sector that contributes a lot to the Canadian economy.
Trump is not at war with Russia or China. They already have a deal. They just don't talk about it out loud. They're all at war. Well, Russia and the United States are at war with liberalism, which is not to say, which is really especially progressivism, progressive governments, and even classical liberalism. That's why a lot of this doesn't make sense to people. Trump is targeting U.S. allies. He's at war with Canada, not with bombs and fighter jets at this point. It's a trade war. But when he thinks of a trade war, what he's doing with his trade war is he's taking it beyond a war about trade, and he's using tariffs and trade as a weapon to achieve geopolitical goals. It's a way for him to achieve his international political objectives alongside Putin and Xi. Until our leaders wake up and realize that that's what's going on, until they really clue in on that, they're at a huge disadvantage because they don't understand their enemy. Or in this case, I would say enemies. You could say that what we're going through is the impact from something of a political coup in the United States, from a guy who said that the elections were rigged. You can speculate, but I think a lot of people are always trying to rig the elections, including him and the people around him, especially in the United States, because the winner gets it all, at least everything in the Western Hemisphere, and maybe more. You know, there's an old saying, though. I don't know that this deal with the devil that these three devils have made, or the deal among the devils, I guess, I don't know if it'll hold in the long run. You see cracks forming because they've made a deal, but they're not allies. They're not really friends either. Frenemies. But there's an old saying, there's no honor among thieves. So while they seem to think that carving the world up this way and just making an agreement to stay out of each other's backyards in the end after they assimilate the smaller countries, the small and medium-sized powers. And I think that there's a mindset that if they just do that, then they'll bring peace. And that's why Trump sees himself as the peace president, right? No. Because there's no honor among thieves. And that's what they're doing. They're not. It's just that simple. They're stealing everything. It's just a free-for-all now. They're just trying to steal other countries, the resources. Maybe mostly in the West. But they're all doing it to one degree or another. And that's something that Mark Carney was really highlighting in his speech yesterday. That made Trump very uncomfortable because he said the quiet part out loud. That even, as Western countries especially, but all the countries around the world, as they sit there and talk about things like democracy and freedom, they've all been benefiting. We've been benefiting from the abuse of people, from the violations of those principles and values, while pretending to hold them dear. And maybe that's why I'm so appalled when I look around me and I see people who claim to be conservatives and that they're nothing of the sort, but they've stolen that name. I was among those who a while back was saying, I don't recognize my own country. But the reason I didn't recognize my own country wasn't because of immigration, although it's certainly transformational in itself, both fundamentally and visually and culturally. Can be. Doesn't mean I can't keep my culture, though, in our society. But I didn't recognize my country during the pandemic, before the pandemic, because the other side went so far and violated freedoms, rights, free speech, and the values that a freedom-loving individualist like myself will have always held dear. The very things that I thought our country was all about. I think in many respects it has been, especially in Canada, but it seemed to evaporate. Made me think a lot about ants. You know, I've been talking about ants. And the other night I was sleeping and thinking. And I said to myself, what if, this isn't an original question, I'm sure of that, but I have thought of this before. I thought about it because of everything going on, because you've got, you know, the giant superpowers, the big powers, and then thinking about us, looking at what went on in Davos as Trump was speaking. And you see these people, they are all incredibly wealthy. They have power. And if they don't have immense wealth, they still have power and influence. They are people of consequence. And so Trump's up there at the podium right now. He's speaking. He's acting like he's going to teach everybody a lesson because he's the man. He's in power. He's got all the answers. Now, I'm going to show you. That's part of the goddamn problem, frankly. The attitude. I'm in charge now, and you're all going to pay. It's revenge time. Unapologetic, right? Not going to apologize for anything, even if I'm wrong. Well, he should. And then out in the audience, Gavin Newsom on the other side. But I'm watching Newsom, and I'm thinking to myself, what would happen if he becomes president and he's up on the stage, and what is he going to do once he's in? Will he be responsible? Will he defend freedom in the way that I have always thought of freedom? Or are we going to go back to crazy town the other way? Extremes. They're all extremists with power. And what about us? We're just little ants. Then I thought to myself, as all this is going on and all this stuff is shifting and these guys have a plan and they're going to do this thing over here, and the political pendulum swinging back from the left to the right and the right to the left and wiping people out in between swings. And then I thought, just philosophically, theoretically, what if human beings are just like other living organisms, like ants? Like maybe we are just living in a life cycle and we're in the middle of it. Maybe all this choice that we think we have is just an illusion. Maybe we're just going through the motions. Maybe that's why it all seems so insane sometimes. Maybe everything we are doing is just like following a cycle. Well, we think we have choice. Maybe we're just going through this cycle, and our colony is just at some stage of life. We don't really know where we came from because we were just born into a colony, right? We don't know. Like, do you remember being born? I don't remember being born. Do human beings even know where we came from? No. We speculate. We keep digging into the past through archaeology to try and figure out what is human history? Where did we really come from? Did we come from the goo in a swamp and crawl out and evolve into human beings? Or did we arrive here on some spaceship? Or did God just create us? And we think we're different because we seem to have a conscience and the ability to reason and think, but maybe we're just a colony of humans living and expanding and going through a cycle like a bunch of ants. When I was a kid, I thought about that very thing, because when I was a kid, my friends and I, we used to play with ants and watch them. My friend directly across the street from me used to live right across the street from where I sit right now. And we used to go over to his house, and there were ants in his backyard, big anthills, colonies. And we would watch these ants, and it was fascinating, so much to learn from them. I'm kind of glad I did. It sounds very nerdy, right? Maybe a little creepy, but no, it was fascinating because the ants would have wars. This is stuff going on all around us, and we're not really paying any attention to it, right? But when you're a kid, you get focused on these little things, which are huge things. And the ant colonies at times during the summers would go to war with each other, and you would see these, you'd see like lines of ants from one colony to another. And these worker ants, army ants, soldiers, they would be carrying like eggs that they had raided from the other colony, and they would take those back to their colony if they were winning the war, if they were dominating and destroying the weaker colony, and they would take the eggs back, and you could see them carrying them, and they carry them right down into those holes and into the earth. And it was a war. And I would think to myself even then, and I still think about it, are we any different? Have we really evolved? Are we any better than we were before? Or we're still basically just running around with weapons saying, here, take this stick or whatever and go stick it in that human being and kill them. And this other guy's got a stick and he's trying to defend his home, and this guy's trying to take it from him. And what's going on right now? Well, now you got submachine guns or super machine guns or mega machine guns or C-rams to shoot stuff down out of the sky with bullets that fire so fast it looks like a laser beam in the atmosphere. And nuclear bombs. Are we more civilized or less civilized than we were when we were all still living out in the forest and the jungle? Before we had civilization. You know, we don't even know where we came from. Do the ants know where they came from, or are they just born and then they go through the motions? Maybe that's what we're doing. We think we have control, and yet this keeps going on and getting worse and worse and worse until maybe we self-destruct. And we won't even realize what has happened, and we'll die in ignorance thinking we were something more than we actually are. In truth, maybe we're just a colony, a product of nature going through a life cycle with an inevitable beginning, middle, and end, and a false sense of self-importance. Ant colonies have a cycle. Some species of ants can exist as colonies for decades. Others, not so long, but they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And their destiny is sometimes determined through a war, where another colony comes in and raids them. They take the young ones, as we've seen in Ukraine and other places. They take the children, or the eggs, thinking they're going to make a bigger, better colony. And I guess they do for a while. Humanity, are we a superorganism? Are we like an ant colony, blindly navigating a predetermined life cycle under the guise of choice and self-importance? This is a perspective that echoes ideas in biology, sociology, existential thought, where individual actions serve the collective without true autonomy. I'm an individualist, and yet I see the power of collectivism when I look at ants, when they work together. A single human against a single ant, the human always wins. But you put a bunch of humans together in a collective and put them up against a collective of ants, and the humans don't always win. Sometimes we lose. Sometimes enough ants together will eat your house. Donald Trump should remember that, or learn that. So let's just look at it closer. You take a look at established concepts. So this idea aligns with the notion of a superorganism, right? which is what biologists, it's a term that they use for highly integrated social units where individuals function like cells in a body, prioritizing the group's survival over personal independence. And ant colonies exemplify that. The worker ants, they forage. You're just a worker ant, right? You're an auto worker. Soldiers defend. You're a soldier. And the queen reproduces and lays the eggs, which are stolen in wars. So our societies exhibit the division of labor. You have farmers, builders, leaders, collective problem solving, and even reproduction through cultural expansion, colonization. It's a lot like how ant colonies butt off new nests. You know, some of these colonies, they produce new queens and they fly off and they make a new colony. The illusion of choice. It ties into determinism. Are we truly deciding or just reacting to biological, social, environmental cues? Are we just like geese flying south in the winter because Mother Nature compels us to do it? Or are we making a conscious choice to do it? In ants, behavior, their behavior comes or stems from like pheromones and instincts. In humans, it could be genes, culture, other things influencing our decisions subconsciously, maybe even the weather. So there are philosophers who have looked at this. I think Spinoza argued that we're part of nature's machinery with free will as a comforting myth. It's an illusion. And yet we get up every morning, put our pants on one leg at a time, or whatever you wear. And you see this complexity in both ants and humans, and it creates this appearance of agency, right? Choice. Ants vote. Yeah, they vote on nest sites in a way, because they're sensing in ways that are akin to human democracies or even markets. They pool their individual inputs into collective outcomes. And if we're midway in our cycle as humans, our tech boom and the internet, the changes in technology, this global connectivity, this move toward what? Singularity or transhumanism even. It might represent this maturity phase might represent like a maturity phase for this chapter in the cycle of humanity, for our colony, or maybe our global colony, or maybe just our Western colony, because maybe we have 3 colonies that are emerging as the biggest colony raids all the smaller ones and takes the eggs and all of the resources and pulls them all back into the mother hive or mother nest. Creepy. It's all building towards some dispersal, I guess. Pretty striking, the similarities, the parallels when you stand back and look at this. I mean, both of these existences represent hubs of activity scaled up from simple interactions to vast self-sustaining systems, which humans have. So do ants. But, unlike ants, humans do possess the ability to reflect on our colony status in a way that ants are not able to. We question these cycles. That's what we're doing here right now. So are we different? Are we a more sophisticated species or organism? Maybe we're just one big organism and we think we're separate and apart and we're really all connected. Or maybe it's both. I think it's probably a bit of both. It's important to hold on to that individuality. Makes me who I am, makes you who you are. But through choice and cooperation, we can work together. Maybe not on everything, but on some things. And you focus that energy, and you can do incredible things, or very destructive things too. So I don't know whether we're doomed by ignorance. I don't know if we're going to be capable of transcending whatever it is that stands in our way. It remains open to question. A lot of people just prefer to be blissfully ignorant, like ants, that never really ever question or ponder these things. And yet somehow they get it done. Have you ever seen this? This is a geometric puzzle that ants are able to solve by working together. It's amazing, really, when you watch it. So these ants, they solve this problem, getting this T-shaped thing through a maze by working together. And then they gave the same problem to a group of humans, scaled up to human size, and they put them side by side to see which group could do it more quickly. Let me show you.
Ants versus humans. Who can solve problems better? The point of this experiment is to determine whether ants or humans are better at maneuvering a T-shaped object through a maze. For this experiment, humans were prevented from communicating with each other, which replicates the limited communication abilities of ants. You can see that the ants did an excellent job at solving the problem. In fact, the experiment showed that ants are better than humans at solving this problem when working as a group. Ants' moves were done strategically. Human groups, on the other hand, didn't show the same level of coordination and cooperation as ants did. Humans were going after short-term solutions that seemed efficient, but were less effective overall. This is likely because each human in the group wanted to move the object in their own way. Ants, on the other hand, acted as a single unified entity with one shared goal. Ants versus...
Pretty cool. See? Never underestimate the power of the little guy, especially when you work together. But of course, a handicap was employed there, and the humans weren't allowed to talk to each other like human beings do. You unleash the full power of human ingenuity, problem solving, cooperation, and individuality. Well, now you've got something. Working with your friends. Yeah, that can get you someplace. Like an assembly line, building cars, like little black Corvettes, little black vets. See you tomorrow night. Hope those auto workers keep their jobs. We're getting new ones. We're working on it. See you at 7 p.m. Eastern. Mañana on the flip side.
She's sitting in the driveway all dressed in black. Got that slick paint, you know she got the knack. Chrome glimmers in the moonlight, like a star on the rise. When I slide behind the wheel, I feel alive. Oh, I can't deny, got the little black vest, she's my midnight ride. Rolling down the highway with my girl by my side. Fast as a whisper, smooth as a dream. In my little black vet, we're a rock and roll team. Leather seats and a rumble that shakes the ground. With the top down low, we're lost in the sound. That engine growls like a lion's roar. Every mile we take, I just want more. Black vet, she's my midnight ride. Rolling down the highway with my girl by as smooth as a dream. In my little black van, we're a rock and roll team. Oh, the world slows down when we hit that street. The wind in our hair can't beat me. With the guitar laying under the stars so bright. In my little black van, everything feels right.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.